Captain, we have them! We've established Transporter Lock, the Star Trek podcast. Join Ken and Sabriel each week as they explore strange new episodes, seek out new plots and new characters, and boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
Hello and welcome to Transporter Lock, where we continue our review of Season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy. I'm Chief Engineer Ken Gagney.
And I'm First Officer Tiffany Bridge. Ken, how are you?
Well, I am a little sad, actually, because just about an hour or two before we started recording, former co-host of the show, Sabriel Maston, reached out to me to let me know some sad news, which is that Star Trek Next Generation actor Patty Yusutaki, who played Nurse Ogawa on The Next Generation, has passed away at the age of 70.
That's sad. I was thinking about her today, when you texted me about this, and just thinking about like those very competent like nurse characters in sick bay in a lot of Trek, right? That sort of recurring actor who doesn't get a lot of lines but's always there.
Yeah, I really liked all the episodes she was in. There was also one moment where the episode where Worf was bouncing between realities. Parallels was the name of the episode.
Mhm.
And in that one of those parallel universes, it was Dr. Ogawa. She
Yeah, it
apparently made
was.
her debut in the Ron Howard movie Gung Ho. And she was also recently on a TV series called Beef.
Oh yeah, okay, sure. Beef with Ali Wong.
This is the first I've heard of it. What can you tell me about Beef?
Okay, so I there was so much TV at the time, and so I did not make it very far into Beef. But the idea of Beef is that it's these two people who just, busy, absorbed in their own lives. They encounter each other by chance. Like one of them like causes a car accident with the other one, and they are so like wound tight and stressed and enraged that it turns into this ongoing escalating conflict between them, and they keep finding ways to try to get to one another, and that's why it's called Beef.
Huh. Kind of sounds like the Hugh Jackman Christian Bale movie, The Prestige.
Yes, but possibly more unhinged in
That
terms of the rivalry.
that sounds awful.
It was a lot to watch, which is why I did not finish it, if I'm being honest.
Gotcha. The one of the things that most surprised me about this actress passing is that she was 70 years old, and I don't understand the passage of time because she seemed very young, at least to me, as an even younger person when TNG was first airing. And I don't understand how somebody that young is now 70 years old.
I mean, that was indeed like 35 years ago, my friend.
I know the show debuted in 1987, so that was 37 years ago, but she looked like she was in her 20s. So that would have put her in her 50s to 60s now. Clearly, she was older than I thought.
Well, if you're going to be a nurse on the flagship, you can't be straight out of the academy, right?
I don't know. We've seen some pretty straight out of the academy people on Discovery and Prodigy,
That is true. That is true.
or even straight into the academy. Speaking of younglings, let's talk about we have seasons two episodes 13 and 14, the first being a triple called Quest and the next being Cracked Mirror. That also makes this our pre-ante penultimate podcast episode of this season of Prodigy.
Pre-anti-penultimate.
It's a
How
word.
long did you sit down to figure out how many prefixes to put on that word?
Oh,
You
I've
planned
had
that.
this word has been in my vocabulary for decades. I whip it out at a moment's notice.
Always ready with
Well,
pre-anti-penultimate.
like in Rings of Power, the Lord of the Rings TV show that aired 2 years ago, the second season of which is this month. I wrote a blog post about it, and as I said, there were 8 episodes, and in the fifth episode, I want to specifically to comment on something that happened in the fifth episode. In my review, I didn't call it the fifth episode; I call it the pre-ante penultimate episode. And somebody asked me, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Why use a short word when a long one will do?"
See, you're using that word, and I'm sitting here drawing a diagram to make sure I understand it.
I have to demonstrate that there is a reason I went to grad school. If if I can't put these lessons to practical use, no matter how impractical, then my entire education was a waste.
Education is never a waste, Ken.
It's true. It's true. Oh, by the way, before we get into Prodigy, there have been trailers for Lower Deck Season 5, Strange New World Season 3, Section 31, the movie, and casting announcements for Starfleet Academy.
I'm so psyched, Ken. I haven't actually sat down and watched all the trailers yet. I feel like I'm kind of hoarding them a little bit for a rainy day, though I did watch the trailer for and it wasn't even really a trailer, it was more just like a teaser, first look for Strange New Worlds, and it was delightful. I know you are not into spoilers, so all I will say is that the hair department continues to be undefeated with Anson Mount's hair.
I would hope so. It's what he's best known for, that and his awesome acting. I'm trying to avoid the trailers because I feel like trailers do one of two things. They sell people on something that they were not previously sold on, or they whet your appetite for what is to come. I don't need to be sold on these things. I'm going to watch them. That my Paramount Plus annual subscription is coming up for renewal next month, $100, 120, and I'm just like, I'm in. I'm all in because I want to see everything Star Trek has coming for us, even though sometimes it's apparently on Netflix, not Paramount Plus. Anyway, so I don't need to be sold on it, and I get so much more pleasure out of surprises. Like there have been times both at home and in movie theaters where I literally jump out of my seat. Like there was a scene in the most recent Spider-Man movie, the live action one, not the animated one. Everybody in the theater apparently had seen the commercials or the trailers or even the movie itself and knew what was coming, and I did not. And I literally shouted, "Holy crap!" And the entire theater burst out laughing, not at what was happening in the movie, but at me. And and I was totally okay with that because my reaction was not intended for their amusement. It was intended to be utterly sincere, and I will never take back sincerity.
I love that about you, first of all. And yeah, I am not as I think I am less concerned about surprises. For me, it's really about the journey. Um, I will say that the teaser content we got from Strange New Worlds was a partial scene, right? It was just a partial scene, and it does raise some, call it canon consistency questions that I'm going to assume are going to be addressed in the show, or they won't be, and we're going to hand wave it away, and I'm going to be fine with it because it was so delightful.
Hand wavy. Why have we never heard of a mushroom drive? Oh, because we are not allowed to talk about it anymore.
I'm not to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, the mycelial universe. Oh, wait. Shh. Anyway.
Shh.
All right. Season 2, episode 13. Tiffany, what is the name of this episode according to you?
A Tribble called Quest.
Because that is not what it is called in other parts of the world.
What's it called in other parts of the world?
A Tribble called Brittle.
Riddle?
That, well,
like with T's?
Well, the Tribble wasn't called Quest in the episode.
They called him Bribble, not Brittle.
Well, the spelling of the episode in other parts of the world are Bridule. That is the name of the episode in other parts of the world.
Well, that's not the name of the little hybrid critter.
Maybe it is in other parts of the world.
But I mean, a Tribble called Quest was not going to, like, that pun was not going to work in other parts of the world.
It was not until about half an hour ago when we were preparing for this podcast that I even realized it was a pun. I had never heard of the music band called A Tribe Called Quest.
Okay. I keep proposing this other podcast where we catch you up on pop culture, and I'm afraid I may have to insist on it.
Why do you make it sound like I'm the deficient one?
Because you've never heard of A Tribe Called Quest, Ken.
I'm sure I've heard of a lot of things you have not.
Even I have heard of A Tribe Called Quest.
I've heard of things you haven't, you know.
That's true, you have.
So what is A Tribe Called Quest?
It's a hip hop group. A legendary one, in fact.
Name some songs. What would I know?
You're asking like, oh yeah, you know, A Tribe Called Quest. Name some songs.
I'm gatekeeping you. That's right. You're not a real A Tribe
Okay.
Called Quest fan.
Well, it's the let's see. It is well, it's the band that Q-Tip came from.
Q-tip like the hygienic object?
No, like the rapper, my dude.
Okay, you just acknowledged that I have no pop culture awareness, and now you start naming rappers, and you expect me to know who they
I
are? Are you
do.
listening to yourself? Maybe we should just move on and talk about Star Trek.
Let's stick to Star Trek.
Yeah. Okay. So in this episode, they need some some naturally occurring material that they can just magically poof turn into a protostar. It's that easy. They don't actually need to go out and find a star and capture it, which would be much harder. And they find a planet that has deposits of this, and they beam down, and it's completely, seemingly barren, ravaged. Nature is out of order, Chakotay says, because he is attuned to these things. And it turns out it's been ravaged by tribbles because a Klingon came here to experiment on them, and his experiments had the opposite effect. And now they are huge, and they have teeth, and they are ravenous.
And they bit Rock, who is made of rock. So they're also not very bright.
But they're also very sharp.
Right. Sharp teeth, not very bright and enormous, which is exactly what you want in a Tribble.
Or not.
I appreciated that they took pains to say that the Tribbles are an invasive species here. I think that's very important for the way the plot goes, right? Because from here, it becomes all about clearing the Tribbles off the planet, um, making them smaller, um, messing up their reproduction, things like that, which is a thing you would only do if it's an invasive species.
You're saying that otherwise it would be a violation of the Prime Directive?
I'm saying otherwise, it would be a violation of pretty much every wildlife management principle now and forever, right? Even preceding the Prime Directive. You don't go trying to like wipe out entire species. It reminded me of this account I follow on Instagram, um, the Black Forager. She does a lot of content around like native foods and foraging and things like that. And one of the things she's always talking about is like when it's one of your native plants, you don't take a lot of it because you want to make sure that to support those populations so that they can continue to flourish. But every once in a while, she'll be talking about how an invasive is edible, and she always adds, "And it's invasive, so please eat all of it."
That's like there's a quote unquote joke. I say that not because it's a bad joke as an offensive. I just don't think it's very funny. Where people say, I'm not a vegetarian because I love animals. I'm a vegetarian because I hate plants. Like, okay. But but you do bring up a good point, which was a question I had in my notes. Rock's approach to diminishing the physical size and population size of the tribbles on this barren planet is a retrovirus. And that smacks to me of biological warfare, which we've only ever seen Section 31 do against the changelings in Deep Space Nine. So how do you or how does Rock justify this approach?
I mean, I think this does kind of go back to the idea that tribbles are invasive. They're not native to the planet. They are destroying the planet's ecosystem. They have to be stopped. And this isn't the only planet that they've decimated, right? We've had like tribbles have been causing problems for years in Star Trek, and that's why the Klingon scientist is there to begin with. And his sort of call it lax laboratory procedures may have caused some of the problems that they're having. But now so not only do we have tribbles, we have like mutant apex predator tribbles that are like ravaging the planet's ecosystem with a quickness. And so I think it is not a terribly difficult ethical call at all. We know that Rock's thesis for getting into Starfleet, which we saw her presenting at the very beginning of the season, was about preventing tribbles from reproducing, right? Which is a well-respected method of pest management even now. Like one of the things that people explore as far as how to control mosquito populations is how to slow the reproductive rate of mosquitoes. And mosquitoes cause all kinds of misery and death among humans. So I don't, to me, this is not a complicated ethical question.
Well, I wouldn't say that how modern civilization here on this planet Earth treats anything should necessarily be a model for Star Trek, because Star Trek is much more, uh, maybe not unanimous, but consensus driven and thoughtful. Like, they have a prime directive. We go around messing with indigenous cultures all the time, still to this day. But the point about it being an invasive species is a good one. We've never seen the Tribble homeworld. I would love to go there sometime, maybe in the last season of Lower Decks.
Right. Like if we were talking about arriving at the Tribble homeworld and wiping them out there, I would
I don't-
probably have a problem with that. But the Tribbles are not only not where they belong, but they are actively causing problems. They're not like Tribble explorers seeking out new civilizations to learn from. They're just eating everything in their path.
You don't see scientist triples.
No, you see them out competing all of the native species and eating all of the grain.
So we are meant to believe that the tribbles are the ones who destroyed this planet, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't think this episode gives us any reason to doubt it.
Sure. Does make me wonder what the planet looked like before.
Sure.
Hmm.
Well, maybe if we come back in another season.
I did think that the almost Indiana Jones-esque opening where they're running away from the tribbles and Zero gets flattened by one,
Yeah.
and not to great ill effect. It's not like Zero got eaten. Just like, oh, pain, what an unpleasantly novel sensation. I thought that was a good
Yeah,
scene.
the Indiana Jones giant boulder tribble was like it was a clear homage and I loved it. I enjoyed that a lot. But yeah, but then we Rock or not Rock, Zero gets injured, and that's when we really start to see the implications of their body not being able to regenerate as quickly as it would have on the planet on which it was created.
Yeah, although I'm sorry for Zero to be experiencing this, I am kind of glad to see it in Star Trek because I don't feel like we often see characters with progressive conditions,
Right.
degenerative conditions. Of course, Picard had Irumodic syndrome, but that
Mhm.
didn't really show up until the first season of Picard, and other than his death, it didn't have a lot of symptoms. I
Right.
mean,
Like it was very clearly a plot device. And, like Picard's brain had plot armor
right,
right up until it didn't.
right. But have we ever seen another character on Star Trek walking with a cane? Probably, but I can't think of it.
We have certainly seen. We've seen Pike using
Oh, that,
various means, various means of like keeping his body alive and being wheeled around and things like that. Because we have seen characters um irreparably damaged.
sure. But okay, that is a fair point, but that was not due to a condition, it was an injury.
Right.
And
Right.
granted, what happened to Zero was an injury from being wheeled over by a Tribble. Didn't think I'd ever say that. But it's also compounded by the body degenerating. And as I may have said before on this show, or maybe I haven't, my mom has multiple sclerosis. That's a progressive condition that slowly degrades the brain's ability to send and receive signals through the body's nervous system so that you lose both sensation and motor control. And there are a lot of other conditions like that, including ALS, which Kenneth Mitchell had. He was an actor on Discovery. He
Mhm.
played a Klingon in season one, and he played a human in season three who needed assistance with a locomoting. And that was not a plot device. That was his actual physical capability at that point in his life. He did pass away in the last year or two, sadly. But other than that, I mean, and those, of course, are significant examples, but this is an animated series. Like, we don't need to cast, we don't need to create a character specifically to accommodate what an actor can and cannot do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a couple of factors also leading into this, aside from, I mean, I think something Star Trek has always endeavored to show is this very hopeful future where humanity has managed to prevent or cure a lot of the conditions that would otherwise be degenerative and disabling over time, right? But also, secondly, we are mostly seeing people in space on spaceships. And so you are not going to see a character who uses a wheelchair to get around for the same reason you don't see flight attendants using wheelchairs, right? There are certain physical requirements of the job of being Starfleet personnel on a station on a ship that is not compatible with using a wheelchair, for example. Like you're not getting through a Jeffries tube in the event of an evacuation in a wheelchair.
True, but there are plenty of other positions. For
Certainly.
example, there was an episode of DS9 where I don't remember if she was a visiting emissary or if she was a Starfleet officer, but she came from a planet that had relatively weak gravity. And so
Sure.
when she's exposed to Earth standard gravity, it has the impact of a disability where she was using a wheelchair until she got back to her personal quarters with its own personal gravity that was lighter and allowed her to stand up. We saw just the opposite on the Orville. We saw a character, the head of security, who was accustomed to very strong gravity on their home world. And so when they are in Earth standard gravity, they are extremely physically capable and strong because to them, this is very weak. And they've like, of course, let me just pry open this door for you like Data would, except I'm not a robot. I'm just somebody who's accustomed to everything being harder. Um,
Sure.
yeah, so we have seen plenty of instances of differently abled individuals in Star Trek, which is amazing because infinite diversity, infinite combination, and nobody should be left behind. What I think is remarkable here is specifically the degenerating nature of Zero's condition. And for me, coming from a family who has that, it just hit different in a way that I really appreciated.
Yeah. Sure. Well, and we saw that hologram Janeway wasn't able to do anything for Zero, but the doctor hasn't had a shot at it yet either. So, um, anything can happen.
It's true. It's true.
But what we did see though was Jankum saying, "Look, when I find that a body part is broken, I just build a better one." And he shows off his metal arm. I was just say, are we going to see some Jacob Pog style prosthetics for Zero upcoming? Does that eventually become Zero's new containment suit? Any number of things could happen.
It does seem like we're seeing a trend here in season one of Picard, in I think season 3 and 4 of Discovery, and now season 2 of Prodigy, where main characters need to get new bodies. Whether it's a golem or something else, their current body is either not functioning properly or is no longer available, and they need a new one. So I hope that Zero can get one that works for them long term to their satisfaction, just like Picard and Gray did.
I mean, if Picard and Gray can have it, I don't see why Zero can't. The
Well,
Doctor is extremely creative.
this is true, but chronologically, this show is taking place before either of those other two.
That's true.
So the science might not be there yet.
That's true. But we also know that we have super geniuses on board who will invent all kinds of things. Like I think the seeds are there. Whether or not they choose to go in that direction is another question.
Hmm.
But I think we have the plot elements are present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Klingon. I liked, although I couldn't help but notice, that not once did the Klingon object to being assisted by Starfleet.
Well, and I think like I maybe I missed it early on, but he had been there a while, right?
Years.
Like he'd been there years and years.
Yes.
And so, so my first question is like, okay, but he came from Martok, right? Chancellor Martok had sent him, and Martok became Chancellor like DS9 era,
The very end of season 7. Yep.
right? So by this point, the Klingon Empire is allied with the Federation, more or less.
Are
Maybe not
they?
super closely, but relations have thawed, right?
I mean, I
Um,
I know that there was a truce with the Klingons, the Romulans, and Starfleet in order to fight the Dominion War. I didn't necessarily get the impression that it was long lasting, but you do make a good point that Martok is definitely more a friend of Starfleet than Galron was. I hadn't really thought about what the long-term implications of that might be,
yeah. So
but
I
you're probably
think,
right.
you know, so this scientist probably is not as reflexively opposed to Starfleet assistance as an earlier Klingon might have been. But also, he's been there a long time. If they can get him off that planet, I think he would probably have made friends with almost anyone.
Probably
Can you
true.
just help me kill the Tribbles?
Well, later on in the episode, he even let Chakotay pilot the bird of prey, which I thought was awesome. I feel like the last time we saw a Starfleet officer pilot a bird of prey, we saw Riker and Worf on some birds of prey in TNG, but I'm thinking more about the end of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, where I don't think Spock was captaining, but he was definitely running the gunning position, the arms and weapons.
Mhm.
And that was really cool to see Starfleet like operating a bird of prey. And so I thought it was cool to have Chakotay helming the bird of prey. And they didn't even make a big deal about it. He wasn't like, "Hey, can I borrow your bird of prey?" And the Klingon was like, "No, you are Starfleet, but just this once."
Yeah, I mean, they definitely did not like deep dive into explaining the history of the Klingon Empire's relationship to the Federation in this children's show. Because I think this is certainly the only Klingon we've run into this season, and I think we did not run into any Klingons last season. Or we did, but like right at the very end when Gwyn was having to translate. Um, And I think that's also part of it. Like Gwyn shows up and she straight up understands his Klingon. And even though it's an obscure dialect. And so I think it was just like, look, I don't care who has to help me. I just want to be done with these tribbles. You want to drive my ship? Great. Just help me
Cool.
fix the tribbles so I can go home.
And Rock does try to, but at one point she sneezes, puts her dirty tissue in a cell culture, and that somehow creates a new breed of animal.
Yeah, some sort of like tribble brickar hybrid situation that looks like an adorable hedgehog with big eyes.
Yeah, I thought that was weird.
And I was thinking, if this, well, it was a little weird. And if it hadn't been for the fact that they discontinued the Star Trek Prodigy toy line, I would have been like, this is a play for merchandising. Everybody's going to want a little plushy one of these things. I wanted a little plushy one of these things. But that doesn't seem to be what they're doing as aggressively with this Trek. So, but it like to me that looked like, oh, they want to make toys out of that.
Did you notice that when they were trying to find this creature before it first revealed itself, conveniently all the lights on the bird of prey had gone out?
Yes.
And then our Gwyn and Majel walk in, and Gwyn is like, "What's going on?" And I expected Gwyn to say, "Why are all the lights off?" Like, "Oh, here, let me turn them on for you. So much better now." But no, everybody's like, "No, we have to use flashlights to find the thing."
Yeah, I didn't quite catch why the lights were out. Maybe I should have gone back and rewatched.
It was dramatic. That's all.
Yeah, maybe.
Definitely going for an alien vibe.
Yeah. But they find the little friend, the Bribble. And but then they finally were like, hey, this retrovirus, we think it might actually work, right? And so they put it out to try and clear the den of tribbles around the Bosunite deposit, around the MacGuffin that they all came there to get. That's going to help them build the protostar. And of course, it didn't work long enough.
Yeah, but Bribble was exactly what they needed, apparently.
Yeah.
Because he can speak Tribbleese, and we never found out what he said or why anybody would bother listening to him, but it just worked.
Yeah, like we're running out of time in this 30-minute episode, and we need this story. I mean, we're definitely getting the sort of like abbreviated Trek treatment in these couple of episodes, where the scientific problems get figured out faster, and everything is kind of kept moving. And I think that, again, that's partially a reflection of the format, right? The 30 minutes. And I think it's also partially a reflection of like the attention span of the intended audience. That, we don't necessarily have time for like a talky scene where like Data and Geordi are working things out like we did in TNG.
I love those.
I love them too, but I can imagine thinking, that's a lot of like reversing the polarity of the tachyon flow for little kids. So I think it's ultimately a more impactful choice to just sort of like, oh no, we have a big exciting scene where we're trying to escape the giant tribbles, and then the adorable, cute little critter comes out and saves the day because he's Tribble enough to be able to talk to the Tribbles, but Bricker enough to understand why he needs to talk to the Tribbles.
Yeah, it was very convenient. And I don't feel like explaining it would have taken all that much time for us adult viewers, but since I know I'm not the target audience, I'm willing to just wave it away.
Yeah, I mean, we're accustomed to a much more talky Trek.
Yes. And we have that.
Than,
That, talkie Trek still exists. And it
yep.
doesn't need to be here. This is not necessarily for us.
But then we get this very sweet narration over the end. And by the way, I love how they are just sharing that opening and closing narration amongst the whole ensemble, instead of focusing it on the captain each week. I think that's a really great example to set for this specific series. I enjoyed Rock having the opening and closing narration, and I enjoyed that the closing narration here about, mistakes are nothing to be ashamed of, and sometimes we learn useful things from them. Um, it's a message clearly articulated for children, but certainly one we can all stand to remember from time to time.
Yeah, I found it to be very unsubtle, but probably what this audience needed.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's unsubtle. I think the moral lessons in these episodes are not you've got to spell them out, before you can. You gotta crawl before you can walk, I think, for a lot of these things.
Sure.
And if you think about it, like, understanding the role of mistakes in growth is like, that's not a problem unique to children.
No.
I'm sorry to say that is the work of a lifetime.
I mean, there's a reason that you and I chat for about a half an hour before we record each of these episodes. Because we have all these other mistakes to share.
It's our mistake time.
Aw. I wish I could limit my mistake time to my podcasts. Shall we talk about the next episode?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Cracked Mirror.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Now this is a plot that we have seen in multiple other places, right? We just saw it recently on Discovery.
Yes, the time bug episode.
Yes. And I know we've seen it in one of the older shows.
That's a good point about the time bugs. I forgot about that. I was thinking very specifically of Worf shifting between universes in the TNG episode Parallels, which I think was already mentioned in this season of Prodigy.
I think it was. I think maybe Wesley made a reference to it.
Maybe. And also, even Chakotay says, I've been through something like this before. That was the episode Shattered on Voyager, where each section of the ship was a different time period in Voyager's lifespan.
Right.
So this sort of takes the best of both worlds, where you're still moving between decks, and each deck is a different something, like in Shattered. But the something is not a different time period. It's a different universe, like in Parallels.
Right.
Yeah. And we start off with some rather minor changes, kind of like when the TV show Sliders first started. Like, oh, we went to a universe where red traffic lights mean go and green means stop. Big difference. Much less, much more trivial than say, oh, the Nazis won World War II. And then the changes get bigger and bigger as they continued to traverse the ship. Uh, I, I was kind of disappointed that they split the party. You never split the party. As a result, we saw almost none of Rock and Zero in this episode. They spent the whole episode on Captain Tuvix's ship.
Yeah, so the thing about this is they seemed like they were leaning hard on every universe on the ship being existing because of some choice the Protostar kids made. But then it clearly wasn't, right? Like they did not create the mirror universe. The mirror universe has always been. Um, and also, what possible choice could the Protostar kids have made that would have allowed Tuvix to A, survive, and B, become captain of Voyager?
You're right. I didn't think about that. They laid out this very scientific explanation and then totally threw it out the window.
They really did. And
Huh.
that was a little confusing to me. Because it started out like I was actually really here for all the universes being a result of their choices. I was here for that. Like, yeah, let's talk about like causality and consequences of your actions. Like that, what a great idea. And then they immediately went mirror universe. And you can tell they're in the mirror universe because Chakotay has a goatee.
Well, let's just dive right into that. I have in my notes, I'm taking these notes in real time as the episode is happening, and I wrote, "It's like that Voyager episode Shattered, but not the mirror universe." And then they go into the mirror universe, and I write in my notes in all caps, "I have been waiting my whole life for this, or at least since 1998." Because 1998 was the Voyager episode Living Witness, where the Doctor wakes up 700 years in the future. And by the way,
Right.
that might be important in future Star Trek shows, just saying. But anyway, he wakes up 700 years in the future, but we don't know that at first. We don't know that what we're watching is a historical reenactment of what happened when Voyager came to that planet 700 years earlier. What we see is an evil Janeway with black gloves on, summarily executing some people. And my first thought when I saw that episode in April of 1998 was Mirror Universe Voyager. Yes, I'm here for it. And then it pulls back. It's like, and so this is what happened to our people in this historical reenactment. I was like, tease. And then this time they did it. They did it. We saw Mirror Janeway and we saw Mirror Chakotay, and we did not see Mirror Tuvok, Mirror Neelix, Mirror 7 of 9. I would have loved to have seen those, which I was robbed of back in 1998. But we went there. We did it. And I'm happy.
Good, I'm glad. I would just like to point out though that Mirror Janeway and is not all that distinguishable from the evil Janeway imagined by the descendants on that planet, which means you could extrapolate someone very much like Mirror Janeway from the incomplete historical record that Voyager left on that planet, which I thought was very interesting.
Right. That's why I was led to believe it was the Mirror Universe all those years ago.
So how far apart are Mirror Janeway and Real Janeway actually?
Well, history is told by the winners.
I
I
mean,
don't-
and I am 100% a Janeway stan forever. But I just feel like Janeway's the kind of character that just like one good nudge in a different direction, and we would effectively have Mirror Janeway.
Well, did you see the TV show on Amazon, Invincible?
No, I don't think I did.
It's an animated series based on a comic book that I haven't read. It's extremely violent, almost too violent for me. I have friends who stopped watching it after the first episode, and I don't blame them. But the second season delves into parallel universes. And in most universes, our main character is a villain.
Sure.
And this is the one of the few universes where he chose to be a superhero. And it's just one little nudge, one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean, Janeway known for murdering Tuvix.
Right.
And repeatedly using the ship as a battering ram to solve various problems.
The Janeway
I
protocol.
just feel like Terran Janeway not that different from Starfleet Janeway, really.
Did she have a Borg implant?
That's what it looked like. Like that straight up looked like a Seven of Nine style forehead Borg implant on Janeway.
I would love to know the backstory behind that.
Yeah, I had so many questions about Mirror Janeway.
What are your questions, Tiffany?
Well, chief among them is like, where'd that implant come from? Tell me
Okay.
that story. Was it that did you get assimilated? Did you conquer the Borg and this is just a thing people do now? So many questions. Second question, why was it not immediately obvious to you that that our Chakotay's beard was made of engine grease? It seems like you were up close enough that you could have noticed. Like, why did Chakotay think that was going to work?
It even looked different. It wasn't fuller.
Yeah, it was the wrong goatee, and we also do know that though we do know that people in the mirror universe are more sensitive to light, so the lights are so that the lights are always dim. So maybe he was counting on bad lighting to carry him through. But yeah, like why did Chakotay think that was going to work was a huge question on my mind.
I mean, Murph thought it would work.
The thing where Mirror Chakotay says, "I'll start with the cute one," just about killed me, and then Murph kicks his butt.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
That
everybody,
was such a great moment.
like even our Chokede or somebody in the party was like, no, not the cute one. I think it was Dahl actually, because they wanted evil Chakotay to lower his defenses. And I loved how they were trolling. It was like, Agonizer. What a great name.
Yeah, I'm always here for mouthy Starfleet kids.
You asked if they had conquered the Borg, and I, back in the early aughts, read many anthologies that Paramount or CBS published set in the Mirror universe. The Borg in that universe, now granted, these are not canonical because they were printed, not televised. The two differences, the one time they touched upon the Borg was instead of a Borg queen, they have a Borg king. And instead of a Borg cube, it's a Borg diamond. So just a cube rotated on a different axis.
Huh.
And that's as far as we got. Like they were just in like a single paragraph, not main characters. And that's all we ever found out about Mirror Borg.
That's disappointing.
Yeah.
That's a lack of imagination.
Yeah. They didn't, I wish they had gone further. But you know who is evil in the Mirror universe?
Jillian.
The whale.
Even the whales are evil.
Even the whales are evil?
Yeah, when they show up in Cetacean Ops and then Jillian rats them out immediately.
Right?
Hilarious.
I mean, she could have been a not evil whale, but if your ship is being invaded by imposters, yeah, you're going to report them.
Well, I felt like the cetaceans were always sort of this representation of the idea of like how much more enlightened Starfleet was, that they were able to um develop a working relationship with these creatures that are so far from being humanoids, right? Because it's this big deal that they go back in time to save the whales from being destroyed by humanity's um, bad choices in the 20th century, right? But then, meanwhile, in the Mirror universe, the Terran Empire still has a working relationship with the whales, but the whales are evil.
Right. They would have to be. Who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe they eat some whales and let other ones serve under threat of being eaten.
right. Like, or maybe it's like a Saru species.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am curious though. Chakotay, or maybe it was Janeway, Mirror, said that the Terrans had installed safeguards against crossings from Starfleet. And I felt like that was more something that the Prime universe would do, that they would not want crossings because, well, yes, when the Prime universe goes to the Terran Empire, they pollute people's minds with ideas like freedom and autonomy and collaboration. But also, the Prime universe is a whole empire of resources waiting for the Terrans to conquer. When they finish with their universe, they're going to come for ours. There was a whole TNG novel about that where Mirror Picard pulled the Prime Enterprise into their universe so that he could replace its crew with his and then infiltrate our Federation as an advance guard for the rest of the Terran Empire. So, like, I'm surprised that the Terrans would not want crossings to happen. Maybe they do want them to happen on their terms, and maybe that's what the safeguard is for.
I think that was sort of the impression that I got, is that like they just don't want us going over there, right? They don't want the Prime Universe in like incursioning, incurring, intruding on theirs, because we will decide who gets conquered and when. Thank you very much. Um,
That's true.
but that was
makes
the
sense.
impression that I got.
Okay, that makes sense. I had to talk it out.
Well, they certainly didn't spend a lot of time explaining that.
No, but as longtime listeners of this podcast know, I'm somebody who likes to get hung up on details.
Yes.
And
That's part of the fun.
and I say that deliberately. I like getting hung up on details. I enjoy it. This is not me nitpicking. This is me, somebody once said that plot holes are to TV shows what pockets are to dresses. They are where you put your fan fiction. So I like to poke those holes. I was under a mistaken impression from Mr. Wesley Crusher about how the loom work, because apparently there are mirror loom.
I think they're the same loom.
These looked eviler, and I think even somebody said that too.
They looked exactly as evil to me. They literally did look exactly the same to me.
Were the original loom red?
These loom were not red. They had just had red tentacles.
Well, that's what I mean. Did the other ones have red tentacles?
Yes.
Huh.
They
I don't
did.
know.
Right, because Wesley Crusher said that the loom are just the species that feed on dying timelines. And it occurred to me, like, as they're in this moment where Voyager is in multiple different timelines / universes at once. Like once the loom showed up, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess this is like bottomless brunch for them, right? Um, there's a lot to feed on here. They're gonna go home fat and drunk.
Yeah, you think they might just follow into the Prime universe because Gwyn is still an anomaly. Like they stopped chasing them after they left the temporal ziggurat, and maybe Wesley Crusher held them off. And they did say in this episode, "Oh, we thought Wesley was going to hold them off." Well, if Wesley's not doing that anymore, or he can't, why did they disappear by the end of the episode? They should have just still chased them.
Well, I think, Wesley, when Wesley was holding off a loom at the end of that episode, he tipped the whole planet they were on like back into its out of phase existence, right? And so it may just be that the loom took a while to get away and get until the plot required it. They come back, because the other thing is, there he may have also just been able to obscure Gwyn from them for some period of time, but you can't hide a whole starship existing in like 8 separate timelines at once, right? Like that paradox is so big.
I see. So that sort of made it more visible and attractive. And now that exists in only one timeline, it's little less noticeable.
Right. It's
Got it.
it's easier for Gwyn to hide out. Um,
And speaking of Gwyn, she had difficulty traversing decks on this episode, which means that the everything that we saw in the mirror universe took place on one deck. So the transporter room, the agonizer, cetacean ops, the brig, and the bridge were all on the same deck.
yeah, all on the same deck. Well, they kept saying that it was divided by deck, right? But then when you would look at like the sort of shatter pattern over Voyager, it didn't look like it was going to be all one deck.
No. But it was in the mirror universe.
Yeah. Well, that just seems like a real failure of ship design in the mirror universe.
Or
Like, why
really
would you ever
convenient.
put the brig on the same deck as the bridge? Those two things should be very far apart from each other.
I'm surprised the Mirror Universe even has a brig because it's ascension through assassination. That's how you get promoted. You don't
Well,
arrest
that's exactly
people.
why they have a brig, because you don't want to get assassinated. You gotta have some
Guess.
place to store your agonizer.
Yeah, you just kill them, I guess. Hmm.
But what fun is that? You don't get to agonize them first.
Agonize. Yes, that's right. You need to agonize them. So in the end, Janeway sort of called a truce. She's like, "Oh, I don't want to die, and these people who I'm chasing can save me." And Chakotay had that really thoughtful line, like, "In no universe could I hurt you." I'm like, really? Really? Okay.
Yeah, but they've been building that one since Voyager. They've
It's
been building
true.
that since Chakotay and Janeway were deliberately stranded on that planet because of that virus they had in Voyager.
Remember that. And
I
they
mean, that man built her a bathtub. Come on.
and we're going a little out of order because there are other things I want to go back to, but eventually he does get back to Voyager by the end of the episode, and he reunites with Captain Janeway.
It was a very emotional moment.
I have to admit, I actually did tear up a little bit
Yeah, I did
because
too.
this was so long coming and it was so heartfelt, and they both missed each other so much. And I honestly wasn't sure if they were going to kiss.
I also kind of wondered that because I was like, come on, I mean, it's been a while. I know you're trying to keep it trying to keep it very professional, especially in front of the recruits. But come on, he's been missing a long time. But also, I know that if my 10-year-old had seen it, his immediate reaction would have been, ew. So,
There is that. And also, by the end of Voyager, they were shipping Chakotay with seven.
yeah, I mean, the writers were doing that. I think that was a bad idea.
And it obviously
It was a
didn't
bad
carry over
idea.
into Picard.
No, no,
Hmm.
no, I chalk that up to like 90s male TV writers.
And the cat suit that they poured her into. Okay.
Poor Jerry Ryan.
So the Protostar and Voyager are now, they have finally reunited these two ships, Voyager and the Supernova. Damn it, the Protostar. I always do that. I don't know why I do that. But I'm curious, like at the very beginning of the episode, it starts with them saying that we've gotten permission to beam aboard. They say that while they are on the Protostar, they're ready to beam
Mhm.
aboard to Voyager. How did they get that permission? Because if Protostar communicates with any Federation ship, the construct will infect it.
Well, so the Voyager that beamed them aboard is still a Voyager that knew about the construct.
Right. But how, again, how does knowing about it make you immune to it?
I mean, they did hand wave this a lot, but we do see Dal explicitly explaining to Chakotay that Starfleet is aware of the construct and is prepared to and is safe from it now. And that's why it's okay for him to let the Protostar leave the planet.
I would like more details than that.
I know you would. I don't know if we're going to get more details. There's probably a lot of polarities were reversed.
If you reverse it more than once, you're just back to where you started.
Shh. Not if they're all different polarities of different things.
Did you notice that Chakotay was letting Dal captain the Protostar?
I did notice that.
I thought that was very thoughtful of him.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how quickly like Chakotay shifted right into mentor mode
Yep.
with Dull. I'm
Yep.
here for it though. Like, yes, was that bit of character development a little bit rushed? Yes, in this particular format for this particular audience, I'm fine with it.
Sure. Yeah, me too. There were two special guest stars this episode that we haven't spoken about yet. First is Admiral Jellicoe.
Yes. And the disappointment when I thought we were getting Janeway and it was Jellicoe.
I think this is
Always
the first time
Jellicoe.
we've seen him in the flesh as much as an animated character can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time we've seen him physically present with our main cast.
Yep. He didn't have too many lines, and he wasn't a terrible person. I was not necessarily surprised to see him. It's not that I was expecting to see him, but when they were like, when they said, we can't wait to see her, and the doctor's like, her? And then you see this torso coming into the room, and I was like, who is it going to be? Oh, it's Jellicoe.
Oh, it's Jellicoe.
Right. Like, there were so many other directions it could have gone, and I don't have any specifics in mind, but like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. Something that doesn't make sense, like Captain Tuvix, would have been amazing. And I think it's torture that they teased us like that and didn't bring back that actor and didn't give him some screen time.
Right. What is that actor even available?
Let's find out. We go to Memory Alpha. We look up Tuvix, the character. Here's his listing, played by Tom Wright, who is now 71 years old and still alive. He was considered for the role of Benjamin Sisko. Citation needed.
Really?
Citation needed.
Yeah, I mean, and he's still acting. He was just in Daisy Jones and the Six.
Oh, and he was
So,
in the 4th season of Star Trek Enterprise.
of course he was.
He played like an alien Nazi. Like you do.
As one does.
Yeah. So yes, he's still around. And the other guest actor we had, or guest character, was the outrageous Akona.
The outrageous Akona?
Yeah, the guy down in sick bay who was pilfering everything with the eye patch.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because and this was one of those moments where I was watching this going, man, I should look this person up because I know I should know them. He's being presented in a way that it's like, look who it is. And I'm like, I don't know.
Oh, really? It didn't ring a bell?
Didn't. Sorry.
So he was in the 1st season of Prodigy on a couple of episodes. And Sabriel and I thought he was being introduced as like a mentor character who was going to stick around, but just like Wesley Crusher, he's gone after 2. But more important, or more originally, he was in the 1st season of The Next Generation. He was on 1 episode, and the actor was actually, he auditioned for the part of Will Riker, did not get it, but they brought him back as a guest character for 1 episode. And then he was referenced by name in an episode of Lower Decks, which you have not seen. But there was a Starfleet party that the crew of the Cerritos were trying to get into, and they couldn't get in there. They were just like, they were not of high enough rank or stature. And at one point, they were like, even Akona is in there. He's DJing. And the captain of the Cerritos was like, Akona? That's outrageous. Because that was the name of the episode, The Outrageous Akona.
Okay.
So they brought him back for this little bit, and I thought that was cute.
Yeah, I'm Googling him up and I'm like, oh yes, okay, this is now ringing a bell. I should have done this research before we recorded. I did not.
It was not a part of the plot that was really important. It didn't really move it forward a lot. That was a lot of plosives. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it did seem a little strange that, I mean, I guess like they find him and that's sort of how they start realizing that something is not amiss. Like they didn't just come back and Janeway's dead. And that's how they realize that there's like timeline nonsense going around. It's not that they changed the timeline and something happened. It's more that like, oh no, we have moved from one timeline to another now.
Right. They were originally going to be evaluated for group psychosis. And when they found the abandoned sickbay, they're like, well, that's not a psychosis. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. Those are all my notes for this episode.
Yeah, that was those are mine as well. It seems like these weren't quite as side questy as some of our earlier side quest episodes were. These did advance the overall plot, but like only sort of around the edges, right? Like it was a whole lot of business to get Chakotay and Janeway back in the same room.
Right. Like the episode where Zero got a body obviously had long-lasting implications for the season, but it didn't move forward the overall plot. Whereas these 2 episodes did. The first episode we just reviewed, they got a protostar for their ship, and the second episode, they got back to Voyager. Like those
They had
things
to do a
happened.
side quest in order to get their protostar.
Right.
Like the protostar was the reward for completing the side quest.
But they didn't have to get Zero a body.
Right.
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 Either way, though, I mean, I just thought they were great, like standalone episodes of Trek. Like we said, that sort of fracturing between different levels of the ship is a plot that we do see on other series, and it worked really well. I think it was used to great effect here, even if it meant we didn't get to spend as much time with Rock, because I think this is the kind of episode where there's just not necessarily room for the whole ensemble,
Mm-hmm.
and so they have to find a way to like stash them somewhere, while they continue on with while the part of the ensemble that's actually plot relevant continues on. And so I felt like the universe where Tuvix is captain seemed like as good of a place as any for them to hide out while we wait for Dal and Murph and Gwyn to solve things.
I do wish we had seen, and I know it's just a half an hour episode, so maybe this is impossible, but I wish we had seen more of those alternative timelines because our main characters only went through three. There was
Right.
Admiral Jellicoe, there was the Outrageous Akona, and there was the Mirror Universe, and that was it.
Yeah.
We briefly saw the one where Tuvix is captain, but notice the alien races on the ship and the uniforms they were wearing were not Voyager. Those were not Starfleet standard. Those looked to me like a Prodigy season 1 episode, All the World's a Stage, which may be best known by its catchphrase, live log and proper. I think that was somehow a callback to that merged with Captain Tuvix, which, of course, where Tuvix is around, there would be a merging of something. But yeah, I just love the idea of parallel timelines. That's one of the reasons I'm fascinated by the Mirror Universe and what if stories, whether it's Star Trek or Marvel. And I'm glad we got to do that here. I'm not saying I'm not, or that it was poorly done. It was great, but it always leaves me wanting more because I love it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it would have been, I would love just like a whole short where we sort of explore the Tuvix universe.
What if we did Star
Yeah.
Trek Tuvix as the next series? There can be, we have the Kelvin universe. Why not the Tuvix universe?
I was just thinking like a 15-minute episode where we see what like Murph and Zero got up to with, or not Murph and Zero, Rock and Zero got up to with Captain Tuvix.
Oh, yeah, I could do a short trek of that.
Yeah, like I just want to like just show me how they spent their time.
Yeah. Yeah, with that Vulcan and Talaxian fusion food. Why not?
Why
Well,
not?
we may not get that, but we do have another 6 episodes of Prodigy still left this season, which means 3 more podcast episodes. We are looking forward to them. I'm not looking forward to it being over, but I am eager to see where this season goes. Until then,
Go fast.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes and keep your hailing frequencies open by following us on Twitter at TransporterLock or subscribing to our podcast and email newsletter at transporterlock.com.